Hey watercolor wizards, Hajra here. Today I'll be showing how to use a proportional divider as a tool while freehand drawing. I previously did a video showing 5 ways to draw anything that you should totally check out. It included a proportional divider, but this video provides more information, including comparing a cheaper and more expensive proportional divider. Art blogs, Q&As, sketches, deconstructed paintings, video notes, art gifts, and more rewards are available for my patrons on Patreon. So first I started by choosing an image I wanted to draw. In this case, a nice daffodil type of flower. For many years now, if I'm using reference for a particular artwork, I just freehand sketch by looking at the reference on my laptop computer screen. This saves a lot of paper and ink, and it's better for the environment. And if you want, you can use any proportional divider on a digital screen carefully or on a hard copy printed reference. For this demo, I printed out the flower reference as it's much easier to fill in paper rather than a computer screen while I'm using a proportional divider on it. I printed out 3 sizes of the flower as I didn't know what size I'd be doing my final drawing. Using digital reference is more versatile as well as less wasteful because I could just enlarge or decrease the size of a digital image on the screen as desired. The proportional divider is actually a marvelous old school tool for these type of size changes, as it can be used to draw an image the same scale as a reference using one side of the divider, or larger or smaller using both sides of the divider. There are various holes on the plastic divider that can be used to increase or decrease the size of your drawing from the original reference. You can see the cheaper plastic one, which I got for $18, has various disparate holes, while the more expensive metal divider, which I got for $125, has a continuous slot that you can slide the screw along for incremental size changes. The expensive metal proportional divider also has very fine needle-like points, whereas the plastic divider has broader plastic points. This won't be an issue if you're drawing at a larger size, but if you like to draw really fine and small, then the more expensive proportional divider will give far more exact measurements and continuous incremental size changes. If you're not interested in increasing or decreasing the size of your drawing and want to do it the same size as your reference, and in fact a digital reference can be tweaked for size changes instead, then you can just use one side of the divider for 1:1 ratio measurements. If you have a geometry compass used to draw circles, you can just use that instead of buying a formal proportional divider if you're planning on doing drawings at a 1:1 ratio. The circle compass is cheaper, more easily available, and can be multitasked to also draw circles. And at least for mine, it actually has finer points than the plastic proportional divider. A proportional divider is just a sophisticated art tool for precise measurements, and it's more versatile because it can be used to proportionally increase or decrease measurements for your art. But you can always use a circle compass in a pinch, or use a strip of paper, your pencil, or your finger to also gauge measurements more roughly if you don't want to buy a sophisticated tool. It's all the same kind of estimating and comparing measurements as you draw. It just depends on how precise you want to be in the end and how far along your drafting skills are. And it's not cheating. If you are freehand drawing and you use your finger, a strip of paper, a pencil, or a proportional divider to help you estimate some measurements, you're still learning and honing your drafting skills. You're just using an art tool like training wheels for efficiency. I'm going to start drawing using the dividers for some measurement help to demonstrate how they work. I'll start by drawing a box around my reference flower that is the same size and aspect ratio as my drawing size. You can also draw an X or cross through the reference and drawing paper for more points of comparison, but I think a box will do fine for this flower. Since I'm just doing this drawing at a 1:1 ratio, I'm going to use one side of any divider and take measurements at various points of the flower from the outline of the box and then transfer those measurements as dots to my drawing paper. I'm just doing some major reference points, like at what point does the furthest petal stretch out or down or up, what's the distance between the stem and the nearest petal, just some reference points to give me a visually fenced off area to draw my flower. This way I don't draw it bigger or smaller than I want in my final piece. It'll be the right size the first time. I'm switching between the metal divider and the cheaper plastic one and the geometry compass while I get my major reference points. And this is so I can compare them as tools. And what I noticed is that all 3 are fine for an image at this scale. The plastic one is the lightest tool, the other 2 are metal, so they are heavier. The broader points on the plastic divider don't hurt much at this scale, but I chose the largest flower printout to draw from. If I had chosen the small or medium flower printouts, the plastic one would have been a bit more clunky to use. I like that the simple circle compass had such fine points and also a little pencil at one end so I could just dot the reference point with the measuring tool itself. So the compass is a nifty cheaper replacement for either of the formal dividers. Again, for same size drawings, this should be all you need, but for doing smaller or larger art in measured proportions, you'll use both ends of the dividers, and that's the real reason to want to have a formal proportional divider around. The more expensive one has exact measurements and incremental changes in size if you can afford it. Otherwise, the cheaper cheaper plastic one is decent for larger art. The expensive metal divider can also be used for navigational measurements on a naval map, and because it's so precise, it can do mathematical tricks like dividing any length into equal segments, dividing the circumference of any circle into equal parts, or to measure and construct various angles. But unless you're dissecting maps or drawing architectural or heavy perspective drawings, you won't use these features, so I won't be sharing them in this video. So I start doing my sketch freehand after I've plotted in and dotted several major points of reference. I will not use a proportional divider again for this piece once I start to sketch, but you can use it more along the way as you sketch and also at the end to check for inaccuracies in your sketch if that's what you want. But I'm putting mine aside for the rest of this piece as I sketch, and I switch to the comparative tools I use more often. My eyes mostly, and also sometimes my pencil or finger. Remember, a pencil or finger or little ruler is just a quick way to gauge measurements if you can't be bothered buying a proportional divider. And definitely my pencil or finger are less precise than the proportional dividers, but they're also faster and free. I do large, simple, general triangular shapes for the petals and oval shapes for the buds. I'll move to more specific, organic shapes in the later drawing stage. And notice how I hold my pencil further back and loosely sideways in my hand. This is rough sketching mode. I won't switch to a more concrete grip or precise lines till later when I'm polishing the drawing. The loose sideways grip lets me pivot my elbow and shoulder and not my wrist. I should use my wrist later for exact lines and not the loose sketching stage right now. Once I feel like most of my flower and petal shapes have been drafted in the right areas, I typically go back in with a kneaded eraser and lighten up all the rough, sketchy lines and redo them in a single neater pencil line, and then I move on to polish sketching. And now my grip on the pencil is further forward and I hold it more tight and straight for precise lines that pivot from my wrist instead. It's time to take the general shapes and divide and polish them into specific petal, stamen, leaf, and bud shapes. I explain going from general to polished shapes in my 5 ways to draw anything video too, if you want to see it for another flower. Try and let yourself slip into a relaxed meditative trance as you draw. It sounds silly, but this is what makes the polished drawing or painting fun, cathartic, and therapeutic for me. I need to stop stressing about the drawing turning out well or not and just loosen up mentally and reduce the flower to abstract, positive, and negative shapes. And once I'm adrift on that sea of abstract shapes, the form of the subject will develop far more easily and accurately than when I'm concentrating on it as an actual flower or whatever it is. Earlier, I used shape comparisons as I drew my rough sketch, like what size is the white triangle of negative space that is formed by the overlapping petals and bud and leafy stem, or what size and shape are the 3 buds in comparison to each other, or at what angles do the open petals sit and in what shapes in comparison to each other. Now I'm going to compare shadow shapes on the petals to each other instead, or where the stamens and their zigzag shadows sit on these various petals. Again, assess everything as an abstract shape. Don't look at it as stamens or petals until the polished sketching is done and you're reviewing it. For other pieces, you may not have a reference at all, but for pieces like this where you do, remember to use some artistic license to alter and improve shapes from the reference as you transfer them to your paper. The best drawing is not the most accurately copied one, though accuracy and drafting skills are important for a more realistic piece. But you also want to bring something artistic and original and not just copy. That's what artistic license is all about. For a single flower on a white background like this, it's not going to be a huge thing at the pencil stage. It'll happen more in the paint and color stage, where I would choose a limited color scheme and where I would choose how to render areas softer or harder, darker or lighter, making it different from the reference. For more complex pieces, lots of things can vary from the reference even in the drawing stage, as you might want to change all sorts of shapes and lines and alter them to make for a better composition. And try and draw at the size and with the medium that's comfortable for you. This might be large on big canvases or full sheets of watercolor paper, or like me, it might be smaller paintings, which I like because small detailed art feels like discovering a little treasure. And it has the added bonus of being faster to paint and using less materials, though for me, the allure of smaller paintings as gems is what first pulled me into doing smaller paintings. If you're filming some of your artwork like I do, then smaller art is also easier to place on screen and more easily gauged as a whole for value and shape accuracy without backing up and getting the camera in the way of my eyeline. So it's all up to your personal tastes and conveniences, but do keep that in mind, otherwise art's going to be less fun for you. Ironically, though I'm filming a few proportional divider videos now, I actually haven't used my expensive proportional divider for the 7 years I've had it until these art tool videos, and I just bought the plastic one for this video as it was requested as a comparison review. And it's because my drafting skills are honed and I can't be bothered to get this tool out when I'm in a hurry. But it's nice to remember I have a proportional divider around. Probably should use it sometimes, if only to check the accuracy of a sketch at the end of a drawing. Remember, you can use art tools as much or as little as you like. This is particularly easy to do with a proportional divider as it's not as obtrusive as a drawing grid or tracing, which give a lot more help. The proportional divider can be used really minimally for major reference points, and then most of the freehand drawing challenge is still yours, like I did in this demo, or just to check accuracy at the end of a freehand sketch. Or you can take many more measurements with it for more help if you're a beginning drafter or you have to finish a piece faster or a piece is particularly complex. And unlike tracing, you don't need more paper for it. And unlike a grid, you don't have to erase all those grid lines. Plus, the proportional divider can be used for plein air help on location, for printed books and references, or for digital references, so it's a lovely, versatile tool in many ways. I will mention that unless you choose to do your drawing on a separate sketch paper, you won't have a reusable sketch. In this demo, I went straight to the watercolor paper, but I prefer to have reusable sketches, so if you also want to have a reserved sketch, use a separate thin sketch paper for your drawing, and you can switch to a guided draw method versus the proportional divider method if you want. And again, your choice of art tools and how much you use them is all up to you. I hope you found it useful seeing me use a proportional divider for select plotted points from a reference before moving on to a rough freehand and then polished freehand sketch. But if pencil's really your thing, then you can go and do much more than I did and use a tortillon to get all glitzy with the value and soft blends and everything. In a companion video, I'm going to show how I figured out how to use a proportional divider to get golden mean ratio measurements too, in case you want to check for harmonious placement before a sketch or after a sketch. And just like I prefer to freehand sketch, I typically gauge harmonious placement in my art just visually with my eyes, but it was fun figuring out that a proportional divider can check that for you too. Well, wizards, please like, comment, subscribe, and check out my website links and Patreon page to support my art and art channel below. Thanks for parking your brushes here, and wishing you all epic drawing adventures.